So it is 1:06 p.m. Welcome everyone to our 7th talk in the School of Teacher Education Colloquium series. Our presenter today is Dr. Emily Plummer Catena. The title of her talk is Adolescents and Educators Writing for Change, Reconsidering Participatory Frameworks and Literacy Learning. A little bit about Dr. Emily Plummer Catena. She's an assistant professor of English education in the School of Teacher Education. She's a National Writing Project teacher consultant and was previously a high school English and communication teacher. Dr. Plummer Catena's research focuses on adolescent literacies and critical digital literacies and youth writing practices more specifically, and emphasizes participatory methodologies. Recently, her work has been published in Research in the Teaching of English and Educational Researcher. Welcome, Dr. Emily Plummer Catena.
Thank you. I want to thank you all for being here with me during quite a packed day, a packed week. As the title of my talk here might indicate, I have some difficulty being concise and brief, so I'm just going to dive right in here and keep it moving because I do have a lot that I want to share with you today.
One thing, Emily, if you can tell the audience about questions. So we will ask you to make sure if you have any questions to put them in the chat, and then we'll leave questions until the end of your talk.
Yes, thank you. Sorry, I already forgot. So this was already touched on a little in my bio, but I'm hoping to use the time today to give a bit more of a picture of the types of research that I engage in, research frameworks that I'm committed to, studies I've done in the past, and a study that I'm currently doing now. So I consider myself a literacy researcher and a teacher educator in English education. My main areas of research are adolescent literacies, particularly high school, digital literacies, and writing. And I think all of these are pretty strongly intertwined. And my work really centers on participatory methodologies. Sorry, every time I click, I'm getting a... and participatory methodologies and my commitments to them are really what I'm going to emphasize today. So unpacking how I have implemented participatory frameworks and methodologies in the past, but also how I'm complicating those participatory methodologies and those frameworks. So I'm going to be talking, hopefully, briefly about 3 different studies today: a participatory ethnography, a youth participatory action research study, YPAR, and then my current ongoing study, which is Practitioner Inquiry. Across these 3 studies, I'm going to be drawing out some common themes. The first is the importance of relationships, not just of forming them, but of really intentionally and openly trying to navigate and unpack those relationships, the power asymmetries that exist and shift within them. The second is the ways that participatory research, which we still often think of as collective, what are we collectively engaging in, creating? Participatory research is actually individual and collective simultaneously, and we don't want to lose the sort of individual in the collective. And the third is the need to push back against binaries between research and practice, especially when working with teachers, and to rethink how we build spaces for teaching and learning and who is considered authority, expert in those spaces. So the first study I'll be telling you a bit about, and this one I'll spend the most time on, seems fitting, it's an ethnography. There's more to tell you here, and as we go, I'll speak a little less about each of them. So I'm focusing on the methodology, as you can see here, participatory ethnography, and this involved developing a high school writing center in partnership with teachers, administrators, and of course, students. And I just want to flag this for you. And I can put it in the chat. This is a collaborative article that me and other members of the research team wrote with students who were involved in this participatory ethnography and part of building this writing center. You see the students there with the asterisks next to their name. We chose this journal, Perspectives on Urban Education. It's free, it's open access, it's tied to the local area where we engaged in the research, and we thought that was especially important for the students to be able to share it easily with families and put it on a college resume. But if you're ever interested, it's a great read and it really centers the students' words. So this participatory ethnography took place in a non-selective public high school in Philadelphia that I'm going to call the Innovation School. The school was part of the city school district's Office of New School Models and was built around the idea essentially of maker spaces, but the school calls them innovation labs. And so I was lucky enough to be the project manager of the literacy lab makerspace, which you can see a picture of here. That's me standing there. And the students came to refer to it as the Lit Lab. At the time, lit was like a cool slang term. Maybe it still is. So that's sort of where that came from. I worked with other research team members, humanities teachers in the school. So English and social studies are combined in the school. And with administrators and students, it was over 5 years that we built this partnership. We quite literally, and I'll show you a video in a minute, we built the Lit Lab and rebuilt the Lit Lab. But first, I want to kind of connect back before I show you some of that building. I want to connect back to that first overarching theme I mentioned earlier about navigating relationships. There is throughout my work, and I hope this surfaces across all 3 studies, but an explicit focus on equity and justice. In this study, particularly as we were working with youth and youth of color. So thinking through some of these questions in the second bullet point here about power and histories of people, of spaces, of practices, of university relationships with the cities that surround them. This was a central part of our work together in the Lit Lab. We talked about these things. And we framed our work in the Lit Lab as a way to make our own worlds, world making, or in the case of the Lit Lab, a way of making our own space. So I'm going to briefly show you how we moved from drawing conceptualizations with teachers and students of what we wanted the Lit Lab to look like, to actually building the Lit Lab. And here, hopefully this works when I push play. This is a video of us, a short video. It's us putting together the Lit Lab, buying the supplies at IKEA, bringing it back to the school. There's a teacher there, students building. Sorry, I'm having some trouble exiting. There we go. So as I get the slides back up, you'll see that was the start of us putting together the Lit Lab. And originally we had to, share the room. But I think we moved, the actual Lit Lab space changed about 3 times over the course of our partnership, but we did end up with our own space, but the same sort of furniture and materials followed us. This is a conceptual map of how the space had different areas for different forms of engagement. And then I'm going to think through a bit how certain purposes actually ended up coming to dominate the space at different times in our partnership. So we see here we have tutoring groups and tables. That ended up being a big focus of the Lit Lab, and also this poetry and performance space. So We see here there's a marked difference in how the space looked in 2015, which was fairly early on in the partnership. This was when the Lit Lab was primarily functioning as a peer tutoring writing center. And then 3 years later in 2018, when the focus of the center shifted to more of a creative writing and sharing space to what students described as more of an arts-based space. I think their goal, they described it as having a coffee house sort of feel. So these pictures here at the bottom, it says peer tutoring. They show a glimpse of the original group of what we came to call writing fellows, who worked with me and other members of the research team to become trained peer writing tutors. We worked with the teachers to develop a curriculum we called Writing Territories, and went through months of training with about 15 in the beginning, upperclassmen students. We ended up with about 10 to 13 who stuck with us, who were nominated by their humanities teachers, and they served as peer writing tutors for their underclassmen peers. And so these are pictures of them engaging in the peer tutoring. And up in the left, this was a field trip that we took to the University of Pennsylvania to do some of our training. The rest are pictures in the actual Lit Lab. And as these upperclassmen students, our original writing fellows, the OGs, as they like to call themselves, as they began to shift their attention to post-high school life, and as they quite literally left, they graduated, the Lit Lab shifted. The students who wanted to remain involved, and we had new students coming to be involved, they voiced that they wanted to move away from this more traditional writing center space. And anyone involved with teaching or learning writing knows that writing centers are laden with a lot of assumptions about who goes to them and who doesn't. And the students wanted to make a more open space where people could engage in all kinds of literacy practices like mural painting, which is what you see here. And the article that I showed you earlier really focuses on the creation of this mural. And so I have a shortened version here. The research team and the students and I used time-lapse footage to give a short look at us moving through creating this mural, which actually took many months and never really finished. But it ended up taking about a school year, but we condensed the footage through time-lapse. And if anyone wants to talk later, there's a free app that you can use on your phone to do it, which is how I did it. It's actually fairly easy. And then we projected the time-lapse footage on a wall in the Lit Lab and had a viewing party. We watched it together and discussed it. And so what you're going to hear in the background, and the closed captioning should appear, you're going to hear a lot of talking, reflective discussion during the video, me asking students questions about the process and their learning and their goals.
I honestly felt like we weren't going to get it done, but now it actually looks like, why? Because before it just looked completely blank, and it's like it's too much blank space to fill in. But now it's just like we can do it. But like, and then seeing it facts, what does that show us?
Well, I guess it shows you teamwork.
Teamwork.
Just to have there was a lot of people.
A lot of people.
We could actually, I feel like we could possibly get a grade for this if we wanted to.
Yeah, so it could be teamwork, right?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think it's educational? Yes.
We
When
could
you
actually,
said that, I feel like you just said that you were planning to kill
that
someone.
we had in this school to do this mural. Like all of the stuff that our school is based upon, like the agency and
all that other stuff, yeah, that doesn't show in our
reflection. It's all within this mural.
Because it's something that we get to work on our own and we planned ourselves.
Like, so getting
Without our
school.
I'm so shocked by how many people come in and out of the frames. Like, I didn't realize how many people.
Looks like a bunch of people.
It's interesting too, in the beginning, there aren't as many people. And then as the mural gets more and more developed, there's more people. There's something like it's attracting people or something.
But it did though.
Yeah,
I mean, it goes.
Or like people who just started here and basically they can like, we kind of made an impact on it, you know, and then we're leaving something behind. Not just like the originals, but the people that's after us following in their footsteps. So
I mean, I got some big shoes to fill, even though I wear a size 4.
She was very small.
When it's done, then what do we do?
When it's
On
done.
and do another thing.
do something else. I like that.
I have to say, I love the way that the one student ends that. I said, what do we do now? And she says, we reflect on it and we do another thing, which seems about right. So, okay, so I think this video, as well as the overall shifts that I've been showing you between purposes for the lab and how the space was sort of more physically laid out and how it was participated in, really demonstrates how participatory ethnography is an iterative process of asking questions, collaborative inquiry, looking into literacy topics and practices together, participatory knowledge and space building, and then learning again as tensions and uncertainties and new goals form and reform, and we kind of just find ourselves going around and around as we decide what the space should be and what we want to do in the space. So I'm quoting here from that collaborative article with the students. What I'm trying to emphasize is how participatory ethnography, while it's quite similar to participatory action research as a broader category, participatory ethnography doesn't focus so much on the joint research activity. So yes, we painted that mural in the case of the video I just showed you, but what we're really talking about is how we decided to create a mural, how we actually went about creating the mural, what happened while we were trying to do it, how did we shift and change and work based on what was unfolding in the space. So as it says there at the bottom, the lived practice of working together towards shared goals. I also want to highlight then that this shift away from the collective activity itself, which is what's most often emphasized in participatory research, we made a mural, we made a newspaper, and more toward the process of learning and making, also illustrates that second theme I mentioned earlier of the individual and the collective happening simultaneously. So we bring our own individual practices and goals. And this relates to something I talk about in the article called thin description. John Jackson talks about it in relationship to an ethnography that he did. Anyone who's familiar with ethnography in qualitative research, the term thick description probably rings a bell. The idea to know the people and the community you engage in and with as fully as possible. But participatory ethnography is guided more by the notion of thin description, which in some ways is maybe opposite. It centers the idea that it's problematic to assume that we can ever fully know others or to know others in a complete way. And it really surfaces issues with representation, particularly when we're engaging with communities other than our own, which we almost always are when we're researchers, particularly when we're working with youth, and particularly when we're working with youth of color. Thin description recognizes that everyone has their own ways of engaging and documenting their engagement. And if you think about that, that's especially true in our digital times. The pictures we take, the text messages we send, the ways that we choose to engage and remember and participate. And so participatory ethnography seeks to attend to that and incorporate that individual into the collective. So that mention in the quote there about thin description, about it being especially important when working with youth, helps to push us into this second study that I want to talk about today, which is a youth participatory action research, or YPAR study, that focuses on journalism in relationship to activism, working with a group of middle and high school students. So for this study, I followed 15 middle and high schoolers as they wrote their way across multiple contexts. We started with the journalism summer writing camp that I put together and facilitated as part of Philadelphia Writing Project summer programming. During the camp, we connected to a global online writing community that was meant as a form of social media for the campers. They connected to the community during the camp, but could stay in there afterwards. And then we followed up with a school year writing workshop program. It was a drop-in model. People could come if they wanted to for however long they wanted to. And that was held every other Friday throughout part of the school year. So here's some pictures of the summer camp, mostly showing students working on their writing, but you can also see there's some adults other than me in these pictures, and these were journalist mentors who worked with us during the camp, and we see some field trips to local news studios. Write for Change was a Google Plus community. I don't know if anybody is familiar. It's now defunct social media platform that Google had put out. As I said earlier, students were connected to the platform as part of the summer camp, and they were encouraged to write there during the camp through assignments, and they were able to stay in the community indefinitely, or I guess as it turns out, until Google got rid of it. So here's a screenshot of the Write for Change community and a poem that a student posted in there, just so you can get a sense of a little bit what it looked like to write or to share something in the community. Here I have just an image of some of the writing conferencing happening during the school year drop-in program, which we called Friday Night Writes. We hosted this at the University of Pennsylvania. It started a month after the camp ended. The camp ended in August. Friday Night Writes started in September, and we met every other week through the winter break. Students from the journalism camp could come, but it was also open to anyone, any student throughout the city of Philadelphia. So I incorporated YPAR across these spaces, but largely in the camp, because that was our initial site of connection, and I wanted to see what would unfold from a participatory framing throughout the other spaces that followed. So I created some of the camp curriculum around these three areas that are considered central in YPAR, according to Mira, Garcia, and Morel. So engagement in the research cycle, provision of social scientist mentors, and publication of topics that are important to students. So these next few slides are going to be brief. They're just examples of the three elements of YPAR in the camp. This is students creating research logs of their work as journalists. Some did it digitally, some that good old fashioned way through reporters' notebooks. And we did use Flipgrid as a place where they could reflect on their research. I likened it to the real world and the confessional videos, and the students had no idea what I was talking about, but that was the idea. So we have that. Social scientist mentors. Here I have logos, and these will probably mean a little less here because these were really local partnerships that I forged, but these are pictures of the different community partnerships that I established as part of this journalism summer writing camp. Each day of the camp, it was 2 weeks, a different journalist or community activist came to the camp and presented and worked with the students. And I'm going to zoom in on one of those mentors in just a moment. But here, this Philly Cam is a local media access radio station in Philadelphia, and that is where we actually hosted the camp. So we're going to talk a little bit about the radio show. And of course, students had lots of opportunities to publish during and after the camp. We made a camp newspaper. Students published in Write for Change, which I talked about earlier. There's a journalism category in a writing contest that the Philadelphia Writing Project is affiliated with down here, the Scholastic Art and Writing Awards. And then here in the center, that live radio broadcast that we put on during the camp with one of our partners that I was just mentioning. The show is called People Power Lunch Hour. So it's an actual recurring show that this news station puts on, and they let us do an episode of that. So if anyone ever has 60 minutes that they'd like to dedicate to watching this, the broadcast is on YouTube. We called it a youth takeover episode because the students were essentially taking over an actual live show. They presented on topics of their own choosing, topics of personal relevance to get back to that YPAR element. And so one student in particular, Kayla, she created a dramatic monologue version of her news article. So they were working on writing news articles. Someone from a playwright organization came to the camp and worked with the students on transforming their news articles into dramatic monologues. And Kayla was really taken with this, and that's what she wanted to share on the radio, was her dramatic monologue. And so I'm going to show you just a snippet of the show, but you'll see, I think you'll see that she didn't actually end up getting to read her monologue. So let me see, let me pull it up here. Right around here.
Our show. And on today's show, we have 4 really great segments produced by youth for youth. Our first segment is going to be talking about diversity and ICE and many other things. Welcome to the show.
Hi.
Tell everyone who you are.
My name is Kayla Marrero. I attend Crestwright Philadelphia High School. I'm a junior and I'm from West Philadelphia.
Hi, my name is Brenda Krishnawongso. I come from Central High School. I'm going to be a senior this year.
Welcome. So tell everyone what you're going to talk about today.
Okay, so today I will do a monologue on how trees are really diverse. Trees live among different trees as it displays an example of how Philadelphia should be. In this monologue, a tree will explain how Philly may appear diverse, but is actually segregated. In fact, the only solution to fix it is by coming together as a community to attend many fun events or organizations in Philly.
That was really great. Did you write that yourself?
Yes.
And what about the monologue form do you like? Just being able to express yourself and like a different form of storytelling?
Yeah, I think a monologue is like very personal to me. So like, I think it's be fun.
Great. What do we have next?
Okay, so I'm not sure if you caught it, but what Kayla was trying to do there was give an introduction to her monologue, and she never actually got to read the monologue. The radio host, Veronica, just kind of jumped in and said, oh, you know, did you write that yourself? And she didn't get a chance to actually read it. And so as you can imagine, this was a very upsetting moment for her. She had wanted to share something really personal. But sorry, I keep doing that. I keep hitting share. What I want to focus on in terms of this situation is how it shows that participatory research is both individual and collective if we go back to that overarching theme. So this kind of awkward mishap happened to Kayla, but it impacted lots of other students in ways that they were really eager to talk about too. And I found that interesting. So here, of course, after it happened, I went and talked to Kayla, and this was part of her immediate reaction. And she emphasizes that she was prepared. She said, yeah, we got ready. We were prepared. But in talking to her, she also emphasized that perhaps we had not worked closely enough with Veronica to prepare for that moment of sharing. Pointing out that first theme about relationship building, it should extend to all the mentors involved in the camp as well. But this was something that happened that was especially interesting, at least to me. So we have another student here, Ramona. Ramona opted not to participate in the radio broadcast at all. She didn't broadcast on air. She didn't contribute music. She didn't want to be involved. And yet she had a lot to say about what happened between Veronica and Kayla. And you can see here, she uses collective pronouns, our, we, and then she broadens from this individual moment where Kayla was cut off. She starts talking about broader notions of learning in schools and silencing of student goals and student interests writ large. At the very bottom, schools don't really let you talk, you know, like they don't actually let you express. And so she moves from this individual moment that happened to someone else to this collective experience in relationship to how she can write and share in schools. And so these tensions with adult mentors like Veronica, who was our radio host, they're experienced both individually and collectively. And we see that in the ways that Kayla and Ramona indicated. And that speaks to the importance of unpacking together when these moments happen, when there are moments of power asymmetries and sort of divisions in our roles and across scales, which again goes back to that first theme. Okay, I realize I'm talking quickly. I think I'm just trying desperately to not have a repeat of this morning and to kind of get through all my points. So I want to carry that idea forward of reflecting across roles and across scales and levels of roles in relationship to this last study, which I'm just going to touch on because it's what I intended to talk about at a different presentation this morning. So this last study is Practitioner Inquiry. And again, I know I've been talking about a lot of different things. This study is ongoing and it includes data with current students. And I believe that I saw one of my students. Is Heather still here? Heather was joining, so I just wanted to give a shout out to her. So I don't have the same sorts of data to share around this study for ethical reasons. I don't I didn't feel comfortable asking students who were still currently enrolled in my course to use pieces of their work. But I'm going to kind of give you some broad level discussion and talk about how practitioner inquiry is actually participatory. So as I just mentioned, the context for this study is an ongoing graduate level English education course for pre-service and practicing teachers. I currently have about 10 students that are participating in the project with me. The course is asynchronous, so I'm also highlighting here that the context for this study involves a number of digital spaces. Canvas, which is sort of our home base, but we're also making really strong use of Flipgrid and this new space. This is a new space for me and for the students called Now Comment, which is a digital annotation platform for readings. And I'd be happy to share and talk more about that later if anyone's interested. This course is called Participatory Culture in Literacy and Learning. So as such, it centers participatory culture as a framework for teaching and learning. And we have here the sort of foundational definition of participatory culture, Henry Jenkins. Essentially, a participatory culture has low stakes ways to get involved, to get started. It's less intimidating. Anyone can kind of at least enter. Sharing across levels of expertise, and there are more informal kinds of mentorship. And there's a sense of community, of belonging, and of mutual interest. So again, we have that sort of communal sense of participatory culture as a framework in the course, but I'm also using practitioner inquiry as my methodological framework in the study. And I position practitioner inquiry as participatory. So Cochrane, Smith, and Lytle talk about participatory action research as strongly related to practitioner inquiry. And that practitioner inquiry and participatory action research involve collaboration between and across educators, university researchers. It can also be parents, community members, or other parties related to education. So in this study, I'm a teacher educator and a university researcher, and I'm working with pre-service and practicing teachers. And we're both trying to understand our own teaching practices simultaneously and reflecting on our collective and individual experiences in the course in relationship to participatory culture. So I have down there a practitioner inquiry and teacher education courses specifically as simultaneously individual and collective, because we're all practitioners engaging with our own practice within the space of the course. And all of this, of course, highlights that second overarching theme from the start about participatory research. I keep saying it as individual and collective, but it also gets at that third theme as we're repositioning here teachers across all experience levels and age groups as experts in their own practices with important knowledge to contribute. And as we build our asynchronous digital learning space around that sort of repositioning, that we're all experts, that we can all contribute. This quote here from Jenkins again, whose work in participatory culture is really seminal. That's why I'm quoting it exclusively. It highlights this need to draw on asynchronous learning environments specifically as spaces in which we can incorporate new ways of teaching and learning through some of those digital tools I highlighted just a minute ago, and also through contributing our own teaching experiences and reflecting on the way that we're learning. Asynchronous environments in particular make it possible for us to hear from and with one another during a pandemic, as we're doing right now, and across physical distances. In my online courses, I have students from all over the state of Florida who would never be able to share about their experiences with one another were it not for this course. So I'm highlighting here one of the assignments in our Participatory Culture and Literacy and Learning course, and this involves a Flipgrid, share and reflect, as I call it. So the assignment asks for the students to engage with a canonical text, a text that they teach or that they find is really often connected to the school context. And then they engage with that text in participatory practices like remixing or restoring. And the goal of the assignment is to analyze your own experience of engaging in remixing and restoring. So not just creating an assignment to give to your students, but actually doing it yourself. And then they submit through Canvas to me an analysis, a reflective and analytical piece about what it was like to remix and restory. And then they go to Flipgrid and they tell each other about it. They create videos and talk about their projects. They can screen share and show their remixing and restories. And overwhelmingly, in reflective assignments and in informal conversations, the students in the course say that this assignment in particular has been one of the most impactful parts of the course for them, because they feel like they're getting just a wealth of resources in terms of their own classrooms. They have a lot of ideas for things that they can try. They're getting feedback directly from other teachers on things that they could use in their classrooms, but they're doing that in direct connection to our course readings and assignments. So we see the thread between their classrooms, each other, and the course. And so this again shows how an asynchronous course steeped in participatory culture makes it possible to engage in individual practitioner inquiry, right? Reflecting on how we teach and learn in our own classrooms at the same time as we're building a collaborative participatory space as teachers together. So an important through thread here is that this sort of individual and collective practitioner inquiry positions teachers as experts, like I said before. And I think that this is something that seems all the more true and important as we grapple with what it means to try to teach and engage in research as teachers with other teachers during a pandemic, which has pushed pretty much all of our activities online and asynchronous. So I said before, this study is ongoing, so I want to flag that analysis is also ongoing. I plan to do the analysis in the summer after the course has officially ended, again, to kind of avoid potential ethical concerns. I'm hoping to be able to engage in participatory forms of analysis. What I'd really like to do is work with one or more of the teachers in the course and have the teacher collaboratively analyze their own data from the course with me. And that's kind of pointing me to a new wondering, which is, are there potential ways to connect engaging in case study research with participatory frameworks? And I know there are some researchers in STE who do a lot of work in case studies. So if anyone has any thoughts, I'd love to hear. So just before I open sort of the floor, I don't know, okay, we have some time for your feedback. I want to leave you with what I'm currently thinking about as I engaged in this. This was a really useful exercise. I think this was the first time I ever really sat down and thought about all three of these studies in relationship to each other. They're all very different, but they're all also really connected around this idea of participatory research. So the first is thinking about how our literacy practices are constantly moving and shifting across spaces, digital and in person. Although I have to say it felt funny to be talking about in-person studies right now. It feels so removed. Talking about a participatory ethnography in the middle of a pandemic felt funny, but I think we'll get back there. But thinking more directly about how we can incorporate movement and flexibility and criticality in how we write and why we write. Can we bring that into classrooms? That seems critical. And that connects back to that collaborative writing piece with the students, talks about autoethnographic practices that we all already engage in these on our own, and thinking about, how those can be useful in classroom teaching and learning. And the second, I'm really thinking about the potentials and the challenges of asynchronous learning for professional development, and thinking about how teacher education courses are essentially their own forms of professional development when the goal is to share resources and creations amongst the teachers as a community. So thank you. I have my email up there. If you feel more comfortable, or if you think of a question later, or just want to chat about something, I would really love to hear from people. So feel free to email me. And these are just my thank yous. So we can open for questions, and I'll just kind of flip through. I do want to give a shout out to my student, Melissa, who told me about this cool resource. If anyone is ever looking to make their slides look fancy, Slides Carnival, super easy and much better looking than the Google Slides I put together for my courses, and my research partners from the different studies and my references. Yeah. So I thought I saw some questions in the chat, maybe. Oh, hi, it's Heather. Hey, Heather. I'm so glad you're here too. I told her I was feeling nervous, so it made me feel good to have a familiar, community member in the room with me. So thanks for being here on your spring break. That's pretty awesome. So, any questions, feedback, thoughts, anything? I know that was like a lot of talking about lots of different things. So after teaching live via Zoom, I'm comfortable with the awkward silence, so we can just wait. It's very familiar.
Hi, Dr. Cantina.
Yeah, sorry.
My name is Jenny, and I'm really interested in teacher professional development for in-service teachers. And I was trying to think of like ways of using this kind of framework to collaborate with teachers in the field. And I just wanted to say that this was a really great presentation. I really enjoyed it. Really sparked my thinking.
Thank you. That's really nice. Thank you. That made my day because, it's no matter what level you're at, it can be scary to put your work out there. So I appreciate you saying that. And if you want, I did a presentation this morning more specifically about the one related to teacher PD, and I could send you that presentation. It might have some more specifics since this one was less the focus here.
Yeah, I would love that. Thank you.
Yeah, could you just put in the chat? It's hard to tell who's like I don't see your specific like floating box. So if you just put your name in the chat or your email, I can send it to you, or you can email me.
Sure thing. Thank you.
Thank you.
I see we have a hand up from Pamela. Pamela, do you want to chime in?
Yes.
So I unfortunately couldn't find the link to this presentation in time. So I got here a little late. So I was wondering if there was any way that I could view this presentation afterwards, because I'm really intrigued.
Sure.
Yeah, I'm actually a freshman, like an undergrad, and I'm looking to transfer into the elementary education program at the College of Education. So I'm just trying to absorb as much knowledge from different areas as possible. And I just want to say, from what I did listen, it was a very amazing presentation.
Oh, thanks. Yeah, I can put the link in the chat because it is a Google slide. So I can do that now. And I will say, I'm glad to hear that as an elementary educator, you find this interesting, because I think sometimes people still think elementary is too early or something to be experimenting with these digital tools. And I think that the pandemic has taught us that's not true. And if you want to talk, I'm doing work on that online community, Right for Change. I'm doing work with an elementary teacher who was one of our moderators in the community. And she helped me learn a lot about like what it's like to try to do this work with elementary students. So yeah, I would love to chat.
And the link for the presentation will also be on social media and posted various other platforms and things too. So you should be able to access it there as well, just so everyone knows. Dr. Tenori, Blake, yeah, you have your hand up, go ahead.
I just want to say real quick too, Pamela, Dr. Catena teaches in the secondary English education program. So if you like her work, maybe give that one a look too.
Yeah, you're right. Sorry, Blake, I should have made the plug myself. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Hashtag always recruiting.
Yeah.
Thank you for your presentation, Emily. I'm really intrigued by the idea of thin description. Having been trained some time ago as an ethnographer, and having the idea of thick description ingrained in me and in my work. Is this critique intended to kind of span across ethnography and maybe even specifically into the teacher inquiry that you're doing now? Or is it more localized than that? Like, is this a call for a sort of a paradigm shift about how we think about our participants and the way we represent them across ethnography, or not really?
That is, of course, Blake asks like such a great question. I'm going to answer what I think. I think that, yes, I think that there is a need for a paradigm shift in how we approach ethnography as a whole, particularly given in my experience, it's often a team of researchers from a more elite research university, predominantly white, who are coming into communities of low socioeconomic status and or communities of color in urban neighborhoods, and all that urban label ends up representing. And the idea that we could ever really know someone else's experience fully seems problematic. And the idea of representing for someone else what their long-term experience of something was seems problematic. And so I think the idea of thin description, it's not that you still sort of do all the things ethnographically that you would do to get thick description, right? You still do the field notes, you're still there all the time, you're still trying to embed yourself, but you're not doing it with the goal of representing the other. You're doing it with the goal of thinking about what that whole process is like, of trying to build a community across all these differences. And really, I think that ethnography and ethnographers should be having discussions with their participants about the power asymmetries and what's happening and why they're there. And I think that I mentioned this when I came here for my job interview, but it still sticks with me, is I think it was one of the first times I ever went to this school where we did this participatory ethnography. And if I'm being completely honest, this school was very, very different than the types of schools that I was used to as a learner and as a teacher. And I had received little to no training. There hadn't been a lot of discussion about these sorts of things, about the power dynamics, about how to position myself and how to just be in the space. And so I probably looked super uncomfortable because I was, and one of the students who I ended up being really close to, she just called me out one day and she was like, "Miss, like, what are you doing here?" And not in a mean way, like leave, but she's like, what is your like role? Why are you sitting in my classes? Like, you're kind of participating, like, and we were told, like, don't take notes. The teachers didn't want us writing in a notebook, and I was floored. I didn't know how to answer her, and I completely froze because I was like, I don't know, like, am I studying you? Like, what? So I think that thin description much more eloquently gets at that idea of just thinking about, like, ethnography is more of a partnership rather than I'm coming in to understand all about you and then report out about you. So I think the answer to your question is yes, but I don't think we throw away the like practices of thick description, of trying to gather all that data and engagement. But the way we do it, I think, did that answer your question? I think I may have just went off on a tangent, but yeah.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for asking.
In that same respect, and I apologize because I missed part of it. My internet connection is a bit tragic, but
I understand.
I'm actually reading a book right now called Ways with Words. I'm not sure if you're familiar, but it definitely has that ethnographic study to it. So I was very happy to hear that this sort of similar framework was being followed in this context. And I just wanted to congratulate you. I know Jenny had mentioned it earlier, but not a lot of studies get at the relationships that you were able to build with the students. And so I just wanted to congratulate you on a job well done, as well as helping me understand a new perspective, because I know many of times I've practiced as a speech therapist. And so my first school was in a community that I wasn't familiar with. And I definitely did get that, why are you here? And so it was stunning, to say the least. So I'm glad that this work is being done. So just wanted to throw that in there.
Well, do you mind telling me, the book is called Ways with Words?
Yes, Ways with Words by someone Dr. Cabell could probably tell you about faster, because I don't have the book right now.
That's all right. I can Google
Shirley Bryce Heath.
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Cabral.
Thank you. I'm going to look that up because I haven't read it, but I will say, like, I connect with you. And I think sometimes, like, at least that's what I try to tell myself, like, when you're the most uncomfortable, that's when, like, something really good and powerful is about to happen. And that was a super uncomfortable moment for me, but it was really, it shifted a lot of the ways that I think about things. So I'm actually really grateful. To Diamond for calling me out like that. So yeah, thanks for sharing and for your kind words. Everyone's being so nice. Thank you. This is like, I wish like all conferences were like this. This is great. Thank you.
About 4 minutes if anyone has any last questions for Dr. Catena before we are officially wrapped at 2. Awkward silence.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, anyone, like I said, feel free, please, to email me. I'm really interested in, getting to know more of the community here. So please, shoot me an email. Thanks everyone for being here. This was a really great experience. Thank you. And a lot of you I'll see again in like 3 minutes. So yeah. Oh, I think I see a hand.
Yeah, Cece, do you have a question?
Yes, I was still intrigued about the thick description versus thin description. So if you're not focusing on thick description, in which you're providing details, right?
Mm-hmm.
What is it that you provide as far as, like, I don't know, your findings, your data analysis? Is it cooperative? Is that what the difference is?
Yeah, that's a fair question. I think that what I was hoping to get across with Blake, but I don't think I did, was you still want to do the same things that you would if you were aiming for thick description. So you're still collecting that data, but like this might be a good example, the Lit Lab video with the mural. When we sat down and had that discussion, the idea was to let as many people as possible contribute to the understanding of what happened. Like, hey, let's watch this video together and let's reflect on what building this was like. So just like affording space for as many people as possible to contribute to the understanding. So like you said, sort of the collective, but letting individual voices be heard in the collective and focusing more on the ways that we're building spaces and meaning together instead of kind of stepping back and saying like, this is what happened according to my perspective. So it's really like centering the participants' perspectives. I'm not sure if I'm answering your question either, but I would be happy.
Like when you write up your findings, like when you do a journal article. So what does that look like if you're focusing?
That's a fair question. So let me show you. Can you see this article up here? I always get confused when I share my screen, like what's actually showing. So this is an article that I and other members of the research team wrote, and the asterisks are the students who wrote the article with us. And in terms of the data that we present, rather than including, excerpts from our own field notes, for example, we actually have the students contribute to the article. So down here, it says to me, Sierra, I, Caroline. So even when you're writing up the article, the idea is to include different perspectives. Sometimes I think that when we have an author write up an ethnography, the idea is that like this is the perspective, when actually there's lots of perspectives within the collective work of an ethnography. So
it's participatory too in the final form. So that's what I was asking. Yeah.
Yes, it was participatory in the final form, but I do recognize like it's a trade-off because to certain journals and certain people, this is not legible in terms of research. This isn't what people expect it to look like. So to Blake's point, and I think like that's part of your question too, is like it's a bit of a paradigm shift. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, well, it is 2 o'clock. Thank you all for attending this month's Colloquium. Thank you, Dr. Catena, and please be on the lookout for information for our last Colloquium, which will be in April. Dr. Jenny Root will be presenting, so we'll be sending around information with the link to register and an abstract. So thank you all again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.